The first time I saw my sister Amelia after our mother's funeral, she was wearing a diamond tennis bracelet that cost more than my car. She held up her wrist, letting the afternoon sun catch the facets of the stones, turning the light into 1,000 tiny, blinding rainbows. "Isn't it exquisite, Clara?" she'd asked, her voice shimmering with the same expensive glow as the bracelet. I decided I needed something to cheer me up, after everything. I remember staring at the bracelet, then at her smiling face, and a cold, heavy stone began to form in the pit of my stomach. Our mother had been gone for less than a month. I was still waking up in the middle of the night, reaching for the phone to call her before I remembered she wouldn't answer. I was living on cheap casseroles and wearing the same black sweater for days on end, enveloped in a fog of grief so thick I could barely see my own hands in front of my face. But Amelia, it seemed, had found a much more sparkling way to mourn. The real blow, however, didn't come from the bracelet. It came 2 weeks later, in a sterile, gray-walled office that smelled of old paper and bitter coffee. I was sitting across from Mr. Abernathy, our mother's estate lawyer, a kind, balding man with eyes that had seen too many families torn apart by grief and greed. He had called me in to finalize the details of the inheritance. "Now, Clara," he said, peering at me over his spectacles. "As you know, your mother's will was very straightforward. The house was to be sold, and the proceeds, along with her savings, were to be split evenly between you and your sister, Amelia." I nodded, my heart aching. My mother had worked 2 jobs for most of her life to pay off that little house, to build that nest egg. She had always said it was her final gift to us, a way to make our lives a little easier when she was gone. "It should be approximately $200,000 for each of you, after all is said and done," she used to say, her voice full of pride. It wasn't a fortune, but to me, it was the world. It was a paid-off mortgage. It was a college fund for my son, Leo. It was a breath of air, a moment of security in a life that had often felt like a struggle to stay afloat. "Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat, a small, nervous sound that sent a tremor of unease through me. He shifted a stack of papers on his desk. "Well, that's where we have a slight complication." "A complication?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He slid a bank statement across the polished mahogany desk. "This is the statement for your mother's primary savings account, the one designated as the inheritance fund. As you can see, a transfer was made 3 days after her passing." I picked up the paper, my hand trembling slightly. I scanned the columns of numbers, my eyes searching for the familiar, comforting balance I knew should be there. Instead, I saw a single, brutal line item, a wire transfer. The description simply read, "Distribution to Amelia Vance." The amount was $200,000. The remaining balance in the account was $73.14. The numbers swam before my eyes. The air in the room felt thin, and a high-pitched ringing started in my ears. I don't understand," I stammered, looking up at Mr. Abernathy. "What is this? This has to be a mistake." He sighed, a deep, weary sound. "I'm afraid it's not a mistake, Clara. Your mother, in the last year of her life, added Amelia as a co-owner on this account. She said it was to make it easier for Amelia to help her with bills if she became too ill to manage them herself. As a co-owner, Amelia had the legal right to access and withdraw the full amount at any time, and it appears that's exactly what she did." The cold stone in my stomach turned to a block of ice, spreading a chilling numbness through my entire body. Amelia, my sister, she had emptied the account. She had taken everything. Not just the money, but our mother's final gift, my son's future, my peace of mind. She had taken it all, and in its place, she had bought a diamond bracelet. I walked out of that office in a daze. I don't remember the drive home. I only remember standing in my own kitchen, staring at the chipped countertops and the leaking faucet I had planned to fix with some of that money. I looked at the framed photo of my mother on the wall, her warm smile a painful reminder of her trust and love, a trust Amelia had weaponized. I picked up the phone and dialed Amelia's number. My fingers felt like lead. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Clara, hi, I was just thinking about you. I saw the most darling handbag today. I think you'd just love it." "Amelia," I said, my voice flat and cold, devoid of any emotion. "I just came from Mr. Abernathy's office." There was a slight pause on the other end of the line. Just a fraction of a second of silence, but it was filled with so much meaning. It was the silence of a person caught in a lie. "Oh," she finally said, her voice a little less bright. "Is everything all right?" "You took the money, Amelia," I said, the words falling from my lips like shards of glass. "You took all of it." Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her take a breath, preparing her defense. When she spoke again, her voice was completely different. It was no longer the cheerful sister. It was a hardened, defensive stranger. "I did take anything, Clara. Mom put my name on the account. It was legally my money as much as it was hers. It's what she would have wanted." What she would have wanted. I choked out, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. She wanted us to share it. She told us that 100 times. She wanted to help both of her children, not just the one who saw her as a bank account to be plundered the moment she was gone. "You're being so dramatic," she scoffed, and the casual cruelty of her tone was like a physical blow. "Honestly, Clara, you need to look at the bigger picture. You're fine. You have your little house, your little job. You're comfortable. I have obligations. I have a certain lifestyle to maintain. Marcus and I are trying to buy a bigger house in a better neighborhood. This money helps us get there. It's an investment in our future." It was an investment in my future, too. I cried, the tears I had been holding back finally starting to fall. It was for Leo's college. It was so I could finally fix the roof without having to take out a second mortgage. Did you even think about me for 1 second? Did you think about what Mom wanted? "Mom wanted me to be happy," Amelia said, her voice dripping with self-righteous justification. "And this money makes me happy. Besides, she always felt sorry for you, you know. She knew you were never as ambitious as me. She probably would have given it all to me anyway if she'd thought about it properly. I was the one who was there for her at the end, taking her to her doctor's appointments, remember." The lie was so audacious it stole my breath. Amelia had visited my mother twice in the last 6 months of her life, each time for a brief, performative visit that involved taking a lot of selfies for social media to show what a devoted daughter she was. I was the one who had been there every single day after work, cooking her dinner, helping her bathe, reading to her until she fell asleep. I was the one holding her hand when she took her last breath. And now, Amelia was trying to erase that reality, to paint herself as the suffering saint who deserved a $200,000 reward. "I was there, Amelia," I whispered, my voice raw with pain. "I was the one who was there." "Well, memories don't pay the bills, do they?" she retorted coolly. "Look, Clara, I have to go. Marcus is taking me out to celebrate closing the deal on our new house. We can talk about this later, when you're being less emotional." And with that, she hung up. I stood there in the silence of my kitchen, the dial tone buzzing in my ear like an angry insect. The tears had stopped. The numbness had receded. In its place was something new, a cold, quiet, and terrifyingly clear anger. She hadn't just stolen from me. She had stolen our mother's memory. She had twisted our shared history into a weapon to justify her own breathtaking greed. She thought she had won. She had the money, the new house, the diamond bracelet. She had everything that could be bought. But in that moment, I realized something. Amelia had left me with nothing, but she had also given me a strange kind of gift. She had given me clarity. I finally saw my sister for who she truly was, a person who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. I wiped my eyes and took a deep, steadying breath. The legal battle for the money would be long and ugly, and Mr. Abernathy had already warned me that my chances were slim. Amelia was a co-owner of the account. What she did was likely immoral, but not illegal. Fighting her in court would drain me of the little money I did have, and it would likely end in heartbreak. No, I wasn't going to fight her for the money. A different idea began to form in my mind, a quiet and persistent thought. She had taken something from me, something she believed was the most important thing in the world. So I would leave her something in return. I would leave her something she couldn't spend, couldn't invest, couldn't wear on her wrist. I would leave her with the one thing a person like her could never, ever buy: the truth. And I would make sure everyone in our family saw it. My journey into the past began in the attic, a place I hadn't ventured into for years. It was our mother's sanctuary of memories, a dusty, dimly lit space filled with cardboard boxes and old trunks that smelled of cedar and thyme. As a child, I had seen it as a magical treasure trove. Amelia had always called it a junk room. That difference, I now realized, was the story of our lives. I pulled the string for the single bare light bulb, casting a weak yellow glow over the accumulated history of our family. Each box was labeled in our mother's careful, looping script: Clara's school papers, Amelia's trophies, family holidays 1980-1990, old photographs. My plan was still nebulous, a feeling more than a concrete strategy. I knew I couldn't beat Amelia at her own game. The world of money, lawyers, and legal loopholes was her territory. She thrived on conflict and manipulation. My world was different. It was the world of scraped knees and bedtime stories, of handwritten letters and faded photographs. My strength wasn't in my bank account, it was in my memory. And our family's memory was stored right here, in these dusty boxes. I started with the box labeled old photographs. I sat on the rough wooden floorboards, the dust motes dancing in the single beam of light, and lifted the lid. Inside were stacks and stacks of photos, loose and in crumbling albums. The first one I picked up was of me and Amelia as children, sitting on a pony at a county fair. I must have been about 5, Amelia 7. I was clutching the pony's mane with a look of pure terror on my face, while Amelia was smiling confidently for the camera, one hand perched sassily on her hip. Even then, she was a performer. I spent hours sifting through the images, each one a small, sharp pang in my heart. There we were, building a snowman in the front yard. There we were on our first day of school, my dress hand-sewn by our mother, Amelia's store-bought because she had thrown a tantrum and refused to wear anything homemade. There was a photo of our mother, young and beautiful, holding both of our hands at the beach, her face alight with a joy I hadn't seen in years. As I looked, a pattern began to emerge. In almost every photo, my mother's gaze was directed at me, a soft, worried, protective look in her eyes. Her arm was usually around my shoulder, pulling me close. Amelia, more often than not, was slightly apart from us, preening for the camera, already seeming to exist in her own separate, more glamorous world. Then I found it. It was a photograph from my 8th birthday party. I was sitting at the head of a long table in our backyard, surrounded by my little friends. I was wearing a paper crown and blowing out the candles on a lopsided, homemade cake. My face was pure, unadulterated happiness, but on the edge of the frame, just behind me, stood Amelia. She was 12, and her expression was a mixture of boredom and pure contempt. While everyone else was smiling and clapping for me, she was staring daggers at my birthday cake. I remembered that day so clearly now. Later, when we were opening presents, she had loudly announced that my main gift, a brand new bicycle, was for babies, and that her bike was much more expensive and grown up. She had managed to turn my special day into a showcase for her own superiority. I carefully set that photograph aside. It was the first piece of my puzzle. Next, I opened a box labeled letters. It was filled with correspondence from our entire lives. Letters from our grandmother, postcards from our father when he was a traveling salesman, and most importantly, letters my mother had written but never sent. She had a habit of writing down her feelings as if to clear her head. I found a stack of them, tied together with a faded blue ribbon. They were addressed to her sister, our Aunt Carol. My hands trembled as I untied the ribbon and began to read. These weren't just letters, they were a secret history of my mother's worries and heartbreaks, and they were almost all about Amelia. One letter, dated from when Amelia was in high school, was particularly revealing. "Carol," my mother had written, "I don't know what to do about Amelia. She came home today and told me she needed $500 for a class trip to Washington, D.C. I told her we couldn't possibly afford that. She flew into a rage, said that I loved Clara more than her because I had just spent $50 on a new coat for Clara. She won't listen when I explain that Clara's old coat was threadbare and 3 sizes too small, while her own closet is overflowing with clothes she's only worn once. She accused me of trying to sabotage her social life. She took the money from my emergency cash jar in the kitchen and left. I feel like such a failure as a mother. Where did I go wrong with her? Another letter from just 5 years ago was even more painful. Amelia called today, it read. She didn't ask how I was feeling after my doctor's appointment. She just launched into a story about how she and Marcus are being forced to go on a cruise to the Caribbean with his boss. She complained for 20 minutes about the cost of the plane tickets. Then she asked if I could loan her $1,000 to cover it. I know I'll never see that money again, just like the money for the car down payment and the money for her wedding dress. When I hesitated, she said, "Well, it's not like you're spending it on anything." Sometimes, it feels like she looks at me and only sees a wallet. I try to talk to Clara about it, but I don't want to burden her. She has so much on her plate already, and she is such a good, kind-hearted girl. She never asks for anything. I had to stop reading. The words on the page were a testament to decades of Amelia's selfishness, a long and sordid history of entitlement and emotional manipulation. And my mother had borne it all in silence, protecting me from the knowledge of just how deeply her other daughter had disappointed her. Amelia's claim that our mother would have wanted her to have the money was not just a lie. It was a desecration of our mother's true feelings. I carefully placed the letters next to the photograph. The pieces were coming together. My work in the attic became my secret obsession. Every evening after my son, Leo, was in bed, I would creep upstairs with a flashlight and a flask of tea and continue my archaeological dig through our family's past. I found my childhood diaries filled with entries detailing how Amelia would break my toys and then lie about it. I found school report cards. Mine were filled with comments like, "Clara is a joy to have in class, always kind and helpful to others." Amelia, while her grades were good, often contained notes like, "Amelia is a strong leader but needs to work on her empathy for her classmates." I wasn't just looking for evidence of Amelia's bad character. I was also looking for proof of my mother's love for the things she valued. I found the box of my son's artwork that she had meticulously saved, from his first crayon scribbles to his detailed middle school sketches. I found the pressed corsage from my high school prom. I found a small, velvet-lined box containing a single, perfect seashell. A note inside in my mother's handwriting read, "From Clara's first trip to the ocean, she was so brave." This was my inheritance. Not the money that now sat in Amelia's bank account, but this rich, detailed, and undeniable history of love and connection. Amelia had taken the cash, but she had left the treasure behind because she had never been able to see its worth. One evening, I found the most important piece of all. It was at the very bottom of a heavy trunk, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper. It was our great-grandmother's locket. It was a simple, silver oval, tarnished with age, not worth much in terms of money. But it was the oldest family heirloom we possessed. Inside, there were two tiny, faded portraits, one of our great-grandmother as a young woman and one of her husband who had died in the war. I remembered the day our mother had shown it to us. We were little girls, sitting on her bed. "This locket represents our family's strength," she had told us, her voice soft and serious. "It's about love that endures through hardship. It's about remembering where you come from. One day, I will pass this on to the daughter who I feel best understands what it means to cherish family above all else." Amelia had been obsessed with that locket, not for its meaning, but because it was the most important thing. She had asked for it for her 16th birthday, for her high school graduation, for her wedding day. Each time our mother had gently refused, saying, "The time isn't right." Tucked beside the locket in the tissue paper was a small, folded note. My heart pounded as I unfolded it. It was a letter addressed to me. It was dated just 3 months before my mother passed away. "My dearest Clara," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone and you have found this as I intended. I am leaving this locket for you, my sweet girl. You were the one who always understood. You understand that family is not about what you can get, but what you can give. It is about quiet loyalty, steadfast love, and showing up even when it's hard." Amelia, my beautiful, complicated Amelia, I love her with all my heart, but I worry about her. She sees the world in terms of price tags. I am so afraid she has never learned to see the value in things that cannot be bought. I want you to have this locket, Clara. Wear it and know that you are the keeper of our family's heart. The true inheritance I leave you is not the money in the bank, but the love we have shared. That is the only thing that truly lasts. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the locket and the letter to my chest. This was it. This was the truth. This was my mother's final word, her true will and testament, and it was more powerful than any legal document in Mr. Abernathy's office. My plan was no longer a vague feeling. It was now crystal clear. The annual family Christmas party was in 6 weeks. It was the one time of year our entire extended family gathered: aunts, uncles, cousins. Amelia always loved to host it, turning it into an opulent showcase for her success. This year, flush with her newfound inheritance, it was bound to be an even grander affair, and it would be the perfect stage. I wasn't going to show up and cause a scene. I wasn't going to scream or cry or accuse. I was going to do something much quieter and much more devastating. I was going to give a gift. I would create a series of beautiful, handmade memory boxes for every single family in our clan. For my Aunt Carol, for my Uncle Robert, for each of my cousins. And inside each box, I would place a carefully curated collection of photographs and memories that told the story of our family. And in each and every box, I would include a high-quality, professionally printed copy of the photograph of me at my 8th birthday party, with Amelia scowling in the background. I would also include a beautifully reprinted copy of my mother's letter to Aunt Carol, the one where she lamented Amelia's greed. And for certain key family members, like my Aunt Carol, who had been my mother's closest confidant, I would include a copy of the final, secret letter my mother had left for me with the locket. I would give this gift to everyone except Amelia. She would receive nothing. She would be left holding her expensive champagne flute in her lavishly decorated living room, surrounded by her new furniture, wearing her diamond bracelet, and she would be utterly, completely, and publicly left out of the one thing she could not buy: our family's shared heart. She had taken the money, and in exchange, I was going to leave her with an emptiness that no amount of cash could ever fill. The weeks leading up to Christmas transformed my small house into a workshop of memory. The dining table, usually covered in Leo's homework and my scattered bills, was now a neatly organized assembly line. There were stacks of high-quality cardstock, spools of simple twine, bottles of archival glue, and the plain, unvarnished wooden boxes I had bought from a local craft store. I'd chosen them specifically for their simplicity. They were honest and sturdy, like my mother's love. They were everything Amelia's diamond bracelet was not. My evenings took on a new rhythm. After Leo was asleep, I would pour a cup of chamomile tea, turn on the soft lamp by the table, and begin my work. It was a painstaking, emotionally draining process. Each photograph I handled, each letter I unfolded, was a journey back in time. I treated each item with a reverence I would normally reserve for sacred relics. I wore soft cotton gloves to protect the fragile paper from the oils on my hands, and I scanned every single photograph and document on the old printer scanner my mother had given me years ago, ensuring the originals would remain safe in the attic. The first box I made was for Aunt Carol. It felt right to start with her. She had been my mother's rock, the recipient of her most secret fears and sorrows. For her box, I selected the most poignant items. I chose a picture of her and my mother as teenagers, laughing on a tire swing, their faces full of youthful optimism. I found a postcard my mother had sent her from her honeymoon, the ink slightly faded, but the joy in the words still palpable. And then, I carefully folded the copies of the two most important letters. The first was the one describing Amelia's tantrum over the $500 school trip, a clear, early example of her entitled nature. The second was a copy of the final letter my mother had left for me, the one naming me the keeper of the family's heart. I hesitated for a long time before deciding to include that one. It felt so deeply personal, a secret just between my mother and me. but I knew that if anyone would understand its significance, it would be Aunt Carol. She needed to know the full truth of my mother's final wishes. She needed to see, in our mother's own hand, that this was not about me being vindictive. It was about me honoring her true legacy. As I assembled the box, tears fell silently onto my work surface. I wasn't just grieving for my mother anymore. I was grieving for the sister I thought I had, the family I thought we were. I was grieving for the innocence that had been shattered by a bank statement. Each piece of paper I glued into place felt like a final goodbye to that illusion. This project wasn't just about exposing Amelia, it was about me taking control of the narrative, of reclaiming our family's history from the person who had tried to buy it and sell it for parts. A few days into my project, the phone rang. It was Aunt Carol. My heart leaped into my throat. "Clara, dear, how are you holding up?" she asked, her voice warm and laced with concern. It was the same tone she'd used my entire life, a comforting balm on any scrape or sorrow. I'm getting by, Aunt Carol," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was just talking to Amelia," she said, and my stomach tightened into a knot. She was telling me all about the new house. "It sounds absolutely magnificent. She said your mother's gift really helped them make it happen." It's wonderful that she was able to give them such a leg up. I closed my eyes, a wave of cold fury washing over me. Amelia wasn't just a thief. She was a propagandist, spinning a tale of maternal generosity to cover her tracks. She was painting herself as the deserving recipient of a beautiful final gift, while I was left to struggle in silence. "Yes," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "It was a very generous gift." "She said she was worried about you, though," Aunt Carol continued, her voice softening. "She said you've been distant, that you're not taking her calls. Clara, I know you're grieving, but you two need each other right now. She's your only sister." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Amelia was orchestrating a campaign, painting me as the unstable, emotional one, isolating me from the family so that if I ever did speak up, I wouldn't be believed. She was salting the earth before I even had a chance to plant a seed of truth. "I know she is," I said, choosing my words with the precision of a surgeon. "Things have been a little complicated since Mom passed, but don't you worry, Aunt Carol. I'm planning on clarifying a few things for the whole family very soon. At Christmas, in fact." "Oh, what do you mean, dear?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "I'm just putting together a little something for everyone," I said, a strange sense of calm settling over me. "A Christmas gift, something to help us all remember Mom and what was really important to her." I could almost hear her smiling on the other end of the line. "Clara, that's just lovely. You always were the thoughtful one." After we hung up, I sat at the table for a long time, staring at the half-finished box. The conversation had shaken me, but it had not broken my resolve. It had strengthened it. Amelia was trying to control the story, but she didn't realize that I was the one holding the original manuscript. My son, Leo, also became a quiet participant in my nightly ritual. He was 10, a sensitive and observant boy with my mother's kind eyes. He knew something was wrong. He knew his Aunt Amelia, who used to sweep in with expensive, plastic toys and loud, fake laughter, hadn't been around. One evening, he came and stood beside my chair, watching me carefully arrange photos in a box destined for our cousins in Vermont. "What are you doing, Mom?" he asked, his small hand resting on my shoulder. I looked at his face, so full of innocent trust, and I knew I couldn't lie to him. But I also had to protect him. I couldn't burden him with the full, ugly weight of his aunt's betrayal. "I'm making memory boxes for everyone in the family for Christmas," I explained, pointing to a photo of a much younger me and Amelia, covered in mud and grinning, holding up a bucket of worms. "I'm gathering up old stories and pictures of Grandma, so we don't forget." He picked up the photo. "You and Aunt Amelia look happy there." "We were," I said softly, "a long time ago." "Why doesn't she come over anymore?" he asked, his voice small. Did I do something wrong? The question was a knife in my heart. I pulled him onto my lap, wrapping my arms around him tightly. "Oh, no, sweetie. No, you did nothing wrong, ever. It's a grown-up problem. Sometimes grown-ups forget what's important. Your Aunt Amelia is a little bit lost right now. Is it because of Grandma's money? He asked. I froze. I had never spoken a word about the inheritance in front of him, but children hear everything. They absorb the tension in a room, the hushed tones of a phone call, the sadness in their mother's eyes. I sighed. Yes, Leo, it's partly because of the money. Grandma wanted to leave some money to help us, to help you go to college one day. And Aunt Amelia, she decided she needed it more. He was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then he looked at the boxes, at the letters, at the locket which I had taken to wearing under my sweater, close to my heart. So you're giving them memories instead. I hugged him fiercely, my face buried in his hair. Yes, baby, I whispered. That's exactly what I'm doing, because memories are the one thing you can't put a price on. They're the real treasure. He seemed to understand. From then on, he would often sit with me while I worked, sorting photos into piles or asking me to tell him the story behind a particular picture. His quiet presence was a comfort, a constant, living reminder of what I was fighting for. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for him. I was teaching him a lesson that Amelia had never learned. That integrity was worth more than interest payments, and love was a more valuable currency than cash. The work continued, box by box. Each one was a unique portrait of a relationship. For my stoic Uncle Robert, I included photos of him and my mother as children, fixing an old bicycle together, a reminder of their shared childhood and his role as her protector. For my younger cousin, Sarah, who was a new mother herself, I chose pictures of my mom holding Sarah as a baby, along with a handwritten recipe card for the colic-calming tea my mother had sworn by. Every box was an act of love, a carefully woven tapestry of our shared past. And every box contained the same two core documents: the photo of my 8th birthday party and the letter about Amelia's high school greed. They were the poison pills hidden within the sweetness, the quiet, undeniable evidence of a character flaw that had been present for decades. A week before the party, the official invitation arrived. It was not a simple phone call or a casual email. It was a thick, cream-colored card, embossed with gold lettering, delivered by courier. It felt less like a party invitation and more like a summons. You are cordially invited to a holiday celebration at the residence of Marcus and Amelia Vance, it read. The address was for a sprawling house in Oakwood Estates, the most exclusive and expensive neighborhood in our city. Amelia was not just hosting a party, she was staging a coronation. She was using our mother's money to build a new life for herself, a fortress of wealth, and she was inviting the entire family to come and admire the walls. The invitation was a power move, a declaration of her victory. I held the thick card in my hand and smiled. She was building her castle on a foundation of lies, and I was about to arrive with a single, simple truth that would bring it all crumbling down. I RSVP'd immediately, a simple, Clara and Leo will be delighted to attend. The night of the party, I was a bundle of nerves. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely apply my mascara. What if my plan backfired? What if the family thought I was the cruel one, airing our dirty laundry in public? What if they sided with Amelia, with her wealth and her confidence? I looked at the stack of neatly wrapped boxes by the front door. They were all wrapped in simple brown paper and tied with red twine. They looked humble and out of place, like poor country cousins waiting to be presented at court. Leo came and took my hand. You look pretty, Mom, he said, and the sincerity in his voice grounded me. Are those the presents? They are, I said, taking a deep breath, ready to go. He nodded, his small hand squeezing mine. I'm ready. I put on my coat, my mother's old wool coat that still smelled faintly of her perfume. And around my neck under my dress, I wore the locket. It felt cool and heavy against my skin, a silent, steady source of strength. As I walked out the door, I felt like a soldier going into battle, armed not with a sword, but with a box of old photographs and a heart full of truth. The war for my mother's legacy was about to begin. Amelia's new house was not just a house, it was a statement. A massive, 2-story colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn and so many glittering Christmas lights, it looked like it could be seen from space. Valet attendants in smart red jackets were whisking away cars as guests arrived. The air smelled of money, pine needles, and a faint, cloying scent of potpourri. Leo squeezed my hand tighter as we walked up the stone pathway. "Wow," he whispered, his eyes wide. "It's like a castle." "It is," I said quietly. "But castles can be cold places, sweetie." The front door swung open, and there was Amelia. She was a vision in a sequined, emerald green dress that probably cost a month of my salary. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup flawless. And on her wrist, catching the light from the enormous crystal chandelier in the foyer, was the diamond tennis bracelet. It glittered with a cold, hard fire. "Clara, you came," she exclaimed, her voice a little too loud, a little too bright. She enveloped me in a brief, stiff hug that smelled of expensive perfume and hairspray. She barely glanced at Leo. Her eyes were scanning the room, already moving on to the next, more important guest. "Of course I came," I said, my voice even. "It's the family Christmas party." "Well, come in, get a drink, mingle," she commanded, already turning to greet our Uncle Robert, who had just arrived behind us. "You have to see the new kitchen, Robbie. It's to die for." We stepped inside, and I felt a wave of disorientation. This wasn't just a party. It was a performance, and Amelia was the star. The house was enormous, with soaring ceilings and polished hardwood floors. A huge Christmas tree, professionally decorated in silver and gold, stood in the corner of the living room, surrounded by a mountain of glossy, perfectly wrapped presents. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and elaborate hors d'oeuvres. The low hum of conversation was punctuated by bursts of laughter. Everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time, completely oblivious to the rotten foundation upon which all this splendor was built. I felt a pang of doubt. How could my humble brown paper packages compete with all of this? How could a few old letters stand up against the overwhelming evidence of Amelia's success? I spotted Aunt Carol across the room and made my way towards her, Leo trailing in my wake. She was talking to our cousin Sarah, but her face lit up when she saw us. "Clara, there you are." She gave me a real hug, warm and comforting. "And Leo, my goodness, you've grown another foot." "It's quite a party," I said, looking around the room. Aunt Carol's smile tightened just a fraction. "Yes, Amelia has certainly done well for herself." There was a subtle emphasis on the word done, a hint of skepticism in her tone that gave me a flicker of hope. Perhaps I wasn't the only one who saw through the glittering facade. I spent the next hour making the rounds, talking to aunts, uncles, and cousins. I kept the conversation light, asking about their kids, their jobs, their holidays. With each conversation, I felt like I was laying the groundwork, reestablishing my connection to them as Clara, the niece, the cousin, the person they had known their whole lives, not the bitter, jealous sister Amelia was undoubtedly painting me as. I saw Amelia flitting around the room, the perfect hostess, her laughter echoing. She was holding court, telling an animated story about her recent trip to a spa resort. "It was absolutely divine," she was saying. "We just had to get away after the stress of the last few months. You know, with Mom and then the house, it's just been so much." My stomach churned. She was using our mother's death as a conversational gambit, a justification for her own lavish self-indulgence. Finally, the moment came. Amelia clinked a spoon against her champagne glass, calling for everyone's attention. "I just want to thank you all for coming to our first Christmas in our new home," she said, beaming, one hand resting possessively on her husband Marcus's arm. "This year has been one of highs and lows. We lost our beloved mother, but I know she is looking down on us tonight, and I know she would be so happy to see us all together, celebrating in this beautiful house, a house that she helped make possible. Her final gift to us was the gift of a new beginning." A murmur of sentimental approval went through the room. I felt my blood run cold. She was cementing her narrative, publicly thanking our dead mother for the money she had stolen. It was a masterful, monstrous move. "And now," she said, gesturing to the mountain of presents under the tree, "I believe it's time for gifts." This was my cue. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. There was no turning back. As people began to move toward the tree, I quietly retrieved my large, sturdy bag from the coat closet where I'd stashed it. I found Aunt Carol first. "Aunt Carol," I said, my voice a little shaky. "I have something for your family." I handed her the simple, brown-wrapped box. She looked at it, then at me, a puzzled expression on her face. "Clara, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," I said. "It's something from Mom, something for all of us to remember her by." Next, I found Uncle Robert and gave him his box. Then Cousin Sarah. One by one, I moved through the room, handing out my gifts. With each one, I said the same thing. "It's a collection of memories from Mom. I made one for every family." The contrast was stark. All around us, people were tearing into glossy paper, revealing expensive electronics, designer scarves, and bottles of vintage wine, all from Amelia. And in their midst were my plain, humble boxes. At first, people seemed almost confused by them. Amelia watched me from across the room, a smirk playing on her lips. I could see what she was thinking. She thought my gift was pathetic. A sad, little craft project in a sea of her expensive largesse. She thought I was proving her point that I was the drab, pitiable sister with nothing to offer. She didn't know that my gifts were not presents, they were time bombs. I had given a box to every family. The only person left empty-handed was Amelia. She stood by the fireplace, holding her champagne, watching as her guests began to open my gifts. The room, which had been buzzing with loud chatter, began to grow quiet. It wasn't a sudden silence, but a slow, creeping one. It started with Aunt Carol. I saw her lift the lid of her box. I saw her pick up the photograph of her and my mother on the tire swing, a soft, sad smile touching her lips. Then I saw her unfold the copy of the letter, the one about the school trip. I watched her eyes scan the page. I saw her smile vanish. I saw her brow furrow in confusion, then in dawning comprehension. She looked up from the letter, her eyes searching for mine across the room. When she found me, her expression was one of profound shock and sorrow. She knew, she understood. Then Uncle Robert opened his. He was a man of few words, but I saw him stare at the photo of my 8th birthday party for a long, long time. I saw his gaze shift from my smiling face to the image of Amelia, scowling in the background. A lifetime of small, forgotten moments, of Amelia's casual cruelties, was suddenly brought into sharp focus by that one, simple image. One by one, the same scene played out around the room. The rustle of tissue paper, a moment of quiet reading, a sharp intake of breath. The mood in the room was shifting. The festive cheer was evaporating, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable tension. Conversations died down. People were exchanging confused, troubled glances. They were looking at the letters in their hands, then at Amelia, who was still smiling, oblivious, and then at me. The truth was spreading through the room, silently, undeniably, in our mother's own handwriting. It wasn't my accusation. It wasn't my bitterness. It was her words, her pain, her story. Amelia's smile finally began to falter. She could feel the change in the atmosphere. Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice losing some of its confident ring. Aunt Carol stood up. She was holding the letter my mother had left for me, the one about the locket. She had tears in her eyes, but her expression was firm. She walked over to where Amelia stood by the fireplace. "Amelia," she said, her voice quiet but carrying across the now silent room. "Your mother, she wrote this, for Clara. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't accuse, she simply held out the letter." Amelia stared at it, refusing to take it. "What is this? What is going on? Clara, what did you do?" She snapped, her eyes finally turning on me, blazing with fury. "I gave them the truth, Amelia," I said, my voice clear and steady. I reached under my dress and pulled out the locket, holding it up for her to see. "Mom left this for me, along with a letter explaining why. She said she was leaving it to the daughter who understood that family is the only thing that truly lasts. She left me the locket. She wanted us to share the money." Amelia's face went pale. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her flawless makeup looking like a grotesque mask. She stared at the locket, then at the letters in the hands of all her guests, her family. She looked at their faces, at their shocked, pitying, and disappointed expressions. She had surrounded herself with all the trappings of wealth and success: the grand house, the designer dress, the glittering diamonds. But in that moment, she was the poorest person in the room. She was an empress with no clothes, a queen in a cold and empty castle. The foundation of lies she had so carefully constructed had crumbled to dust. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time in her life, Amelia Vance was utterly, completely speechless. She had taken my inheritance, all $200,000 of it, and in return I had left her exactly what I had promised. I had left her something she couldn't buy, couldn't spend, and could never, ever escape: the truth. And with it, an emptiness that all the money in the world would never be able to fill. The silence in the room was a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. It pressed in on Amelia from all sides, a tangible manifestation of the judgment of an entire family. For a few long seconds, she was frozen, her face a mask of disbelief. The emerald green of her dress seemed garish now, the diamonds on her wrist like chips of ice. She looked from the locket in my hand to the faces of her guests, and in their eyes she saw no support, no doubt, only the slow, dawning horror of understanding. Then the mask cracked. A choked, guttural sound escaped her throat, a cross between a sob and a snarl. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a rage that was all the more terrifying for its initial quietness. She took a step toward me, her eyes wild, the carefully constructed persona of the gracious hostess shattering into a million pieces. "How dare you come into my house, my beautiful home, and do this to me?" Her voice rose with each word, climbing into a hysterical shriek that echoed off the high ceilings. "You're a jealous, bitter little snake. You have always been jealous of me. Jealous of my success, jealous of my husband, jealous of everything I have that you don't." I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, the locket cool against my palm, a solid anchor in the storm of her fury. I met her gaze and held it. "I was never jealous of what you have, Amelia," I said, my voice calm and clear, cutting through her hysteria with a quiet force that seemed to surprise even me. "I was sad about what you've lost." Her husband, Marcus, who had been standing by her side like a well-dressed but useless accessory, finally sprang to life. He put a weak, placating hand on her arm, his face a mask of social panic. "Amelia, honey, let's just calm down. This isn't the time or the place. We have guests." "Don't you tell me to calm down," she screeched, whirling on him with the fury of a cornered animal. "She's trying to ruin me. Can't you see that? Get her out of my house. Get her and her pathetic little gifts out of here." "I think," Uncle Robert said, his voice a low rumble that commanded instant attention. He had been a man of few words his entire life, and when he spoke, people listened. He had his box open on a nearby table, and he was looking at Amelia not with anger, but with an expression of profound, weary disappointment. "That Clara has simply shown us the truth. Your mother was a good woman. She worked her fingers to the bone for you girls. She didn't deserve to have her memory twisted like this, just so you could have a bigger kitchen." The finality in his tone was like a judge's gavel falling. That was the signal. The dam of social politeness broke, and the party was over. The festive atmosphere didn't just fade, it curdled. People started to move, not with the cheerful energy of a celebration, but with the quiet, urgent haste of people fleeing a disaster zone. There were murmurs of "we should be going," and "it's getting late, the kids are tired." No one was making eye contact with Amelia anymore. They gathered their coats and their children, their faces a careful mixture of embarrassment and pity. They moved like a silent tide, flowing toward the exit, and every single one of them clutched one of my brown paper-wrapped boxes. They were taking the truth home with them. Amelia watched them go, her face contorted with a mixture of rage and sheer panic. She had built this stage to display her triumph, and now her audience was walking out on the final, disastrous act. "Don't go." She cried out, her voice cracking with a desperate edge. "She's lying, she's making it all up. It's just old letters, she's twisting things." But no one stopped. No one even looked back. The letters in their hands, the photos on their laps, were more powerful than her desperate denials. My gift had done its work. It hadn't just told a story, it had armed every single person in that room with the same, undeniable evidence. She wasn't just fighting me anymore, she was fighting our mother's own words, her own sorrow, her own truth. And it was a battle she could not possibly win. Leo tugged on my sleeve, his small body trembling slightly. "Mom, can we go home now?" He whispered, his eyes wide and scared. He had been a silent witness to it all, and the raw, adult ugliness of the scene had clearly shaken him. "Yes, baby," I said, pulling him into a protective hug. "It's time to go." I turned to leave, but as I passed Aunt Carol, she reached out and squeezed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "You did the right thing, Clara," she whispered, her eyes full of tears, but also a fierce, unwavering pride. "It was hard, and it was brave, and it was the right thing to do. Your mother would be so proud of you today." Those words were worth more to me than all the money in Amelia's new bank accounts. They were the validation, the comfort, the inheritance of love that I had been fighting for all along. I squeezed her hand in return, a silent thank you passing between us. As we walked out the grand front door, back into the cool, clean night air, I took one last look back. Through the large picture window, I could see Amelia. She was standing alone in the middle of her vast, opulent living room. Her guests were gone. Her husband was standing awkwardly a few feet away, looking at his shoes, not touching her. She was surrounded by the glittering lights of her perfect tree and the mountain of expensive, unopened gifts. She was a solitary figure in a gilded cage, and the silence in that room was surely louder and more terrible than any of her shrieks had been. I had walked into that party feeling like a poor relation, an unwelcome ghost at the feast. But I walked out feeling like the richest woman in the world. I had my son's hand in mine, my mother's love around my neck, and the unwavering truth in my heart. Amelia had the house, the bracelet, and the money. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I had gotten the better deal. The drive home was quiet. Leo fell asleep in the passenger seat, his head lolling against the window, his face finally relaxed. The adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins for hours began to subside, leaving behind a profound sense of exhaustion, but also a deep and abiding peace. I had faced the dragon, and I had not been burned. I had spoken the truth, not in anger, but in honor of my mother, and that had made all the difference. When we got home, I carried a sleeping Leo inside to his bed, tucking him in and kissing his forehead. My own small house, with its chipped countertops and its worn, comfortable furniture, felt like a sanctuary. It was a home filled not with things, but with love. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the dining table, the same table where I had painstakingly assembled the memory boxes. The house was silent except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. I reached up and unclasped the locket, holding it in the palm of my hand. It felt warm from my skin. I opened it and looked at the tiny, faded portraits of my great-grandparents, symbols of a love that had endured. My mother had been right. This was the true inheritance. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize at first, but the area code was from Vermont. It was my cousin Mark. "Clara," the message read, "just got home. My wife and I just finished looking through the box. We are so sorry. We had no idea. What Amelia did was wrong. We stand with you. Let us know if you need anything at all." A moment later, another message came through. It was from Sarah. "Oh, Clara, my heart is breaking for you and for Aunt Rose. Thank you for showing us the truth. I'm speechless. And I'm here for you, always." Then the phone started ringing. It was Aunt Carol. I answered, my voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted to make sure you and Leo got home all right," she said, her voice gentle. "We're home," I said, a tear rolling down my cheek. "We're okay." "No, you're more than okay," she said firmly. "You are strong, and you are good, and you have reclaimed your mother's honor tonight. I've been getting calls for the last hour. Robert is furious with Amelia. The cousins are all in shock. No one had any idea how she had been treating your mother and you all these years. You didn't just open a box of memories, Clara. You opened everyone's eyes." We talked for a long time, and with every word, I felt a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying begin to lift from my shoulders. The years of feeling unseen, of feeling that my quiet contributions to the family were invisible next to Amelia's loud, flashy existence, were over. They saw me now. They understood. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from the Christmas party was swift and decisive. Amelia, it turned out, had not just built a house on a foundation of lies, she had built her entire social standing within the family on it. And with the foundation gone, the whole structure collapsed. She and Marcus had planned a big New Year's Eve gala, another chance to show off their wealth. They had to cancel it. The RSVPs had trickled to a halt, replaced by polite but firm declines. Uncle Robert, who was the patriarch of the family, had called her and told her in no uncertain terms that she owed me an apology and a check for $100,000. And that until she made things right, she was not welcome at any family gatherings. From what I heard through the family grapevine, Amelia did not react with remorse. She reacted with rage. She accused everyone of taking my side, of being brainwashed by my sob story. She tried to spin a new narrative, one where I was a master manipulator who had forged letters and twisted old photographs to turn the family against her out of sheer jealousy. But it was too late. The evidence was too personal, too widespread, and too clearly in our mother's own voice. She had lost all credibility. Her frantic attempts to control the story only made her look more guilty, more unhinged. She had played the victim for so long that she didn't know how to be anything else, and now no one was buying the performance. I did not receive an apology, nor did I receive a check. And honestly, by that point, I no longer expected or even wanted one. The money had become a symbol of everything that was wrong with Amelia. Getting it back would have felt like accepting a piece of that poison back into my life. My victory was not financial, it was moral. And that was a victory that felt clean and pure and lasting. Life settled into a new kind of normal, a better normal. The family rallied around me and Leo in a way they never had before. Uncle Robert showed up one Saturday with his toolbox and a couple of his buddies, and spent the entire day fixing my leaky roof and replacing the faulty faucet in the kitchen, refusing to take a penny for the materials. Aunt Carol started a tradition of Grandma and Leo Day once a month, taking him out for adventures so I could have some time to myself. My cousins called and texted regularly, not out of pity, but out of a genuine, newfound respect and affection. I had lost a sister, but I had gained a real family. Spring arrived, and with it, a sense of renewal. I was sitting on my porch one sunny afternoon, watching Leo play in the yard, when a sleek black car I didn't recognize pulled up to the curb. My heart did a little flip of anxiety. I watched as the driver's side door opened and Amelia got out. She looked different. Thinner. The expensive, confident glow she had always radiated was gone, replaced by a brittle hardness. She was wearing oversized sunglasses that hid most of her face and a severe black coat, even though the day was warm. She looked like a woman in mourning for her own life. She walked up the path to my house and stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, not coming any closer. She didn't seem to know what to do with her hands, clutching and unclenching the strap of her designer handbag. "Clara," she said, and her voice was flat, empty of its usual theatricality. "Amelia," I replied, my tone equally neutral. I did not invite her to sit down. I did not offer her a drink. I simply waited. "Marcus and I are selling the house," she said, staring at a point somewhere over my shoulder. "We're moving. His company is transferring him to the West Coast." I knew this wasn't the whole story. Aunt Carol had told me that Marcus's promotion had been jeopardized by the family scandal, and they were giving him a fresh start in a different city, a polite corporate exile. "I see," I said. There was a long, awkward silence. The only sounds were the birds chirping and Leo's distant laughter as he chased a butterfly. "I came too." She started, then stopped. I waited for an apology, for some flicker of remorse, for any sign that she understood the depth of the damage she had caused. "I came to tell you that you've ruined my life," she finally said, the words dripping with a venomous self-pity. "I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted. You turned everyone against me. You destroyed my family." I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch, looking down at her. The anger and pain that she had caused me for so long were gone. In their place, there was only a vast, empty sadness. A pity for this woman who had everything and nothing all at once. "I didn't destroy your family, Amelia," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You did. You made a choice. You chose money over memory. You chose a bracelet over a sister. You chose a house over a home. Everything that has happened since is just the consequence of that choice. This is the life you bought with mom's money. I truly hope it was worth the price. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned around, went back inside my small, love-filled house, and gently closed the door, leaving her alone on the sidewalk with the ruins of the life she had chosen. I never saw her again. Years passed. Leo grew into a fine young man with his grandmother's kind eyes and his Uncle Robert's steady hands. He got a scholarship to a good state university, not because of a fat inheritance check, but because of his own hard work and intelligence. My life was not grand or lavish. I never got rich. But it was a good life, a full life. It was filled with the quiet joy of true friendship, the unwavering support of a loving family, and the deep, abiding peace that comes from living with integrity. Sometimes, late at night, I would take out the locket and hold it in my hand. I would think about my mother, and I would think about Amelia. I had come to understand that my mother's final gift to me wasn't just the locket itself. Her real gift was the clarity to see the difference between price and value. It was a lesson Amelia, in all her wealth, would likely never learn. She had bought her happiness, and I had earned mine. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, whose fortune would truly last. If you enjoyed this story and would like to support our channel, Mama Lottie Stories, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more tales of life, love, and the lessons we learn along the way. We'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Clara's situation? Your stories and your wisdom are a cherished part of our community. Thank you for listening.